Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for giving up part of your Saturday and coming and expressing an interest. It's good to see everybody here. I suppose my main aim in getting sort of this whole Keep Webster Green started and giving this presentation today is really because I sense that the development in Webster has reached a point where it is starting to affect our quality of life. I feel that especially since probably around 2000, development has increased quite a bit. There isn't a lot of remaining green space left, and I think it is a concern on a lot of people's minds. It seemed to me to be a timely issue given the upcoming election. So it's something that the candidates, you can see on their ballots, are clearly, their campaigns are addressing this as an issue. So it's obviously something that people are aware of. So today really is just about giving you a bit of an historical perspective. Some of you might have this perspective already. You've obviously, lived here for a while. So I'm going to be looking at really the way open space has changed since 1974, which was when the, to my mind, first open space plan was instituted. So if we start with that, and we go to the next slide. I don't know why my animations aren't working, but that's okay. So Webster has about 22,000 acres, give or take. Okay, current estimates, this was in 1974 is what they said. Current estimates, they're calling it sort of 19,800 and a bit. So we can call it 20,000. All right, in 1974, our undeveloped green space was about 8,000 acres. This didn't include 3,102 acres of agricultural land and 760 acres of parks. So our total there would have been about 11,860 acres. And I can pass out this Word document that I created, which breaks it down for you a little bit further. So you've got a table there, which shows you basically the way that the acreage has changed over time. In 2000, and I'm going to move that board because I can see that it's cutting into. Hi, Will.
Hi.
So I'm just getting started, so you're not missing much. Go ahead and grab a seat wherever. This is a Word document that's showing you change in acreage of open space, various forms of open space over time. All right, you guys get one too. Okay, so if we look at then how that changed by 2000, we then only had, and it wasn't a huge decrease, okay? We then had in 2000 less than 10,000 acres, 9,250. Okay, so you can see that the undeveloped green space was still almost 7,000 acres in 2000. We had more park land, not including the golf course, because I didn't have data for that. The golf course does get included in later figures, which is, you can see in 2006. Agricultural land had been halved between 74 and 2000, which isn't that much of a surprise. Actually, one of the reasons for the 1974 open space plan was the decrease in agricultural land. I think it was like 12,000 something in like 1954. So it really was, starting to change quite a bit. If you look at this, which I don't know how well we can see this. I'm going to get in front of my projection a little bit here. You can see what I like to call the fingers of the woods. Now, in the 1974 open space plan, there was a recommendation to preserve these woods because they were actually only one of 6 areas in this area of New York to have old-growth hemlock-type hardwood forests. So we were very lucky as a community to have that natural resource, and you can see how they follow the stream valleys. So in 1974, you can see, and this is still much the case, at least around Webster Park. This is where our Whiting Road and our Gosnell Big Woods are. But you can see how a lot of this area where the woods are dipping down into was still relatively vacant. So the zoning at the time was, or at least the development at the time, the planning at the time was protecting these wood corridors, essentially, these natural corridors. And that was one of the recommendations, one of the touchstones of the open space plan in '74, was that it honor essentially the woods, preserve those as a resource, and preserve the wildlife corridors, so that obviously wildlife wasn't displaced into our backyards, as is happening today. So anyway, so that was '74, and you could see how much open space we still had then. If you look at what happened then, going into 2000, right, we still had that much open space. This is kind of hard to see, but this was our green print in 2000, so we were still looking, okay, at all of this was like the proposed green area, and there's something actually that apologies for continuing to dig behind the curtain, as it were. I did make a copy of this, but you can kind of see a little bit. Everything yellow was under consideration to be included in the green print in 2000, okay? Green is parks, pink was unfortunately already developer owned, okay? So you've still got though, quite a bit of open space there that, could potentially be protected. All right, so that was 2000. If you then take it forward into 2006, there was a huge amount of development between 2000 and 2006. So the 6,900 or so open space acres that we had in 2000 were halved into 3,336 acres. And that's because there was quite a lot of single-family home development in that time. I think the figure, at least from the 2008 comprehensive plan update, was that it was something over 1,700 new homes were built during that time. So Webster changed quite dramatically in those 6 years, and I would say I don't have this kind of precise data for what happened between 2006 and now, because the comprehensive plan has not been updated since 2008, so that's something that probably does need to be done. But that was a really, I would say, dramatic rate of change. Okay, moving on to the next slide. All right, so I'm not sure this is the right PowerPoint, actually. Which one are you using? Yes, but which one are you using? I'm sorry, everyone, just take a pause here. Yep, so this should be within the folder, not the PC. It should be within the Webster Green Space folder. And then you'll get my animations. Here, Webster Green Space. Yep, okay. And then we should have... No, there is no PowerPoint saved. Just go back to the USB. I can work with what we've got, it's fine, but... So it's just that. Okay. I saved it on the laptop, now I'm looking more on it, okay. All right, and you know what, then let's just, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna do that, and then we're going to, okay, all right, okay. Might have to modify here. All right, so the current amount of total acres of undeveloped green space, okay, it's at least...
Slide that over a little bit.
Yeah, I can. It's at least, I would say, probably about 2,000, okay? In fact, can you take a pause? Can you just go and get on the laptop and put it on the USB while I'm talking? Because that's the one I need for the rest of the presentation. Sorry, everyone. Technical difficulties. So, we've got just over, give or take, a few hundred. We've got over 2,000 left right now. I couldn't get an exact figure on that because due to the way that open space is zoned right now, a lot of the open undeveloped space, quote unquote, is within plots that have already been developed. So you've got, let's say if you've got like a tract of houses, that open space within those houses is considered part of the undeveloped land. But it's for our purposes of let's say, preserving wooded lots and preserving, you know, corridors, it's not really, you know, the only people that are going to be appreciated, you know, able to appreciate that are people that are already living in those, you know, those housing tracts. So I couldn't get data which separated out that land from, you know, plots like this, essentially, okay? However, even if we say we estimate at least 2,000, okay, we've got 1,570 acres of parks, okay? And that's not including the 378 acres of open space in existing developments. And I think the discrepancy there between the 1652 and the 1570, because I did include, I think it's not including the golf course here in the 2019 data, which is quite right, because as we know, that's going to get developed. So we've got, again, the decrease in agricultural land, so the farmer's fields, okay, goes down to 1232. That is, you know, that is including the 438 acres they were able to purchase in development rights, which is good, if we trust that the purchase development rights are going to be used to protect that land and not do something else with it. So we'll see. But anyway, we've got a total of at least 5,180. So you can see that, you know, one of the positives here, the rate of change between 2006 and 2019 isn't really that dramatic. So, you know, we're working with a lot less here, which is probably, you know, part of the reason. But yeah, there was a huge rate of change between 2000 and 2006. And if you talk to people that were involved in the 2000 referendum that failed, there was some issue with misinformation put together by developers 3 days before the event. If you talk to people involved in that, they will say, you know, if only it had passed, if only that bond, you know, we could have secured it, that would have preserved over 3,000 acres, okay? So the one that did pass in 2008 got us, I think it was just over 1,000 acres. And that includes some of the land that was being looked at in this 2001 green print. So that includes the Whiting Road area and the Gosnell Big Woods. And I think a few more parcels. But at the moment, we are 10 years after the fact. The bond for the current open space acquisition is due to expire in 2025. So it might be time to consider updating that if we want to continue to preserve the open space that's left. Okay, because obviously with development, there is no, you know, natural limiting check on that. It's got to come from us, the people, and the town board enacting our wishes. So, if you look at my paragraph, and we're about to get back to the PowerPoint in just a minute, the pros here, okay? We'll go over the pros and the cons here and then get back to my PowerPoint. So, decreasing rate of development since 2006. That's a question. I don't know, because I wasn't able to obtain precise data for our current undeveloped green space. Although subjective experience suggests this may be changing. Okay, so I think another reason that, you know, I chose to try to raise this issue now and get people involved and interested in this issue is that it does feel like all of a sudden there's quite a lot of development. And this could be, you know, because of the economic recovery since 2016. If you look at a lot of the green space in Webster, it does seem to be pretty rapidly disappearing. For instance, this patch between Holt and Hard, okay, medium-high residential, okay, this was zoned industrial. The sign in front of it still says zoned industrial. Presumably they were able to obtain a variance because this is where all of those apartments are, in spite of it being wetlands. Okay, so what they did is they just basically built around the little patches of wetland. Because the wetlands were so small, there was no buffer requirement, all right? Now, obviously, it doesn't take a genius to realize that if you cut down all the trees around the little patches of wetland, those wetlands aren't going to be there for very much longer. So, yeah, it's questionable as to whether or not you're actually doing anything to preserve them, okay? But this was all woods, and this was part of one of the last bits, actually, that, you know, outside of the Windsor Park area, you can see, I think it goes right around here, you've got, the wood fingers that are actually dipping down into that area. So that got cut down to make the apartments. We've also got, I think there are plans in the works, the old lumber yard, okay, is getting developed, right? So that's another patch that's going. We've got, what is it, the corner of Phillips and something else, Brittany Woods, right? That got clear cut. Another thing too, in the 2008 project, the one in 2001 would have resulted in, I think at its maximum point, something like $85 per household at the end of the year to help pay off the bond, all right? So that wasn't why people voted it down. People voted it down, again, because of the fear that developers had that the town was taking all of their future profit. And, the campaign that they did at the very last minute. Okay, next one. Okay, this is kind of a well-known statistic. If you've got a house that's, I think, less than like $300,000 value, there's been a couple studies that show this, it's actually a burden on the town, not a tax benefit, all right? Because of the infrastructure you have to provide, because of the school costs, because of, all of the things that go into caring for a population that are, that come out of our taxes. Okay, so it's actually not necessarily, financially great for the town to be building more residences. All right, opportunity cost. So this is my biggest thing. So it's not just about how much something costs. It's about what you're paying for it, and also what you are paying for it and what you have to give up, okay, by getting it. So if you say that you, right, it costs nothing, let's say, to just let developers develop the land. We can sit there with our low taxes as they continue to build plazas and shopping malls and businesses, and that's good for us because it keeps our taxes low. But we are actually paying. We're paying by the opportunities that are being taken away from us with every plot of land that gets developed. Okay, so we're losing the opportunity to drive without unreasonable congestion. We're losing the opportunity to breathe clean air, to see trees on the horizon. And we're losing the opportunity to have potential future parkland, to go in. We're losing the opportunity to have those resources, those trees, once they're paved, that forest isn't coming back. Okay, so you're giving up that resource and that's it. You could, if you wanted to really, and I don't even like looking at it like this, but you could argue that you can always develop it in the future, right? But setting it aside for now at least gives you the opportunity to enjoy it. Okay, next point. And that's just a philosophical point to consider. It's, for me, I think you can't really place an economic value on things like trees and on things like green space. If you value it just in terms of dollars and cents, maybe you could make an argument which says, that maybe it does make sense to keep developing. But if you're valuing it on a different scale, absolutely not. You're losing much more than you're gaining. Okay, next one. All right. So there are a few solutions. I think that forming a new open space committee is something which definitely should be happening. It's something that the town board, or at least the supervisor at the moment, is definitely open to if the public wants it. Or at least that was the impression I got when I went to the meeting. This is something that, if it were started now, would be timely because it would take a few years, because committee takes a long time. It would happen in time for the current bond expiring before 2025. Now, pie in the sky, personally, I wouldn't mind breaking the tax cap and being able to just get it now. But I know that that is a real check for a lot of people, so I think that maybe is unrealistic. I mean, unless everybody sort of expressed an interest in that. But in any case, this is a very real possibility and one that is definitely worth considering. Okay, next one. Okay, so individual landowners could do their part if they do own a large amount of land or a wooded lot or something along those lines. They could reach out to the town and express a willingness to sell. Okay, so that obviously any sort of open space acquisition does require a willing buyer or a willing seller. And this is something which is, you know, that should be, I think, an ongoing campaign on the part of the town. Conservation easements. So for those of you that don't know about conservation easements, what it is again, if you are an individual landowner, you can willingly forego development rights of your land in exchange for tax sort of rebates. So if this is something that you're interested in, the Genesee Land Trust is a really good place to go. I've printed out a few different informational leaflets here, which people could take if they so chose. I am not like an expert on the ins and out of it, but I do know that it's a pretty significant discount, rebate, whatever. There is financial incentive to do this, in addition to obviously the ability to protect your land, because the conservation easement is tied to the land, not you, so you're kind of forever protecting it. Okay, next one. This is an interesting one. So, obviously with zoning, it's very controversial. My opinion is that there at least needs to be a zoning amendment, and I think that, you know, pursuing kind of zoning changes which make development, or at least which alter the nature of how liberal development can be, would be a sensible strategy in conjunction with pursuing another open space acquisition. And this is something, again, if the public were to express, you know, a desire for, the town probably would be obliged to consider. So zoning amendments, to my mind, a few ideas would be, number one, if you look at the zoning map that we have right here, you can see that even Webster Park and Gosnell Woods and Whiting Road are all actually zoned large lot residential. Now, I've been told that this isn't unusual for parkland, and I know that there are restrictions on that land because it is classified as a park and it's hard to get rid of parkland, but it's not impossible. And I know that rezoning it would make it impossible, but I think that rezoning the areas which we have as a town declared, these are our protected areas, you know, I know there are other parks throughout Webster, rezoning them to at least reflect the fact that the intention is to preserve this land wouldn't be something that you know, should be considered out of line or impossible. I would think that that's kind of a sensible thing. The other thing that you could do with zoning would be to have tree ordinances, okay, so a requirement that in any new development, and we're already doing this to an extent, there is clustered zoning, so they do require that a certain amount of development be left as open space, but open space for the definition of, for the purposes of the zoning ordinances, is actually anything on the lot that isn't the building. So you could clear cut and pave it and it would still be open space, which doesn't really help. So if you had tree ordinances, you would at least be preserving within any development, like let's say the woods behind it. Currently, and this is just coming at me now, there are parking lot size requirements, which I think could do with amendments. The parking lots need to be a certain size due to the capacity within every store for theoretically a certain amount of people. And at the moment, it's just outlandish. So that's why you have, you know, with the Holt Road Plaza, you could argue that could be, without that parking lot needing to be so big, that could have been half the size. You could have saved half of those woods. So the other thing would be possibly to, you know, amend some of the, you know, the designations in certain areas here to reflect a desire to conserve them. So one thought that I had would be that, you know, if there were areas of land that you wanted to preserve in the open space referendum that you were seeking to acquire, you could zone those conservation, you know, and compensate the landowners obviously for the land, but you could zone those conservation as well. So those are just some ideas. And if we go to the next slide. This is the current map of preserved land in the town of Webster. All of the red bit is quite interesting because this is what I was talking about with the open space, you know, within like existing development. So that has been kind of something which they've clearly tried to do. So, you know, thumbs up, that's good. But as I said, because there's no tree ordinance, because there's no sort of, you know, requirement to preserve wood acreage, it is kind of somewhat ineffective, I would say. And you'll recognize a lot of the blue. You can see that that's North Ponds, and that's if you cross the road, okay, and go towards, you're going along the path where the birds and everything. It's really nice. The tax incentive open space, these properties here are coming, this was negated in 2010 because something to do with the legality not being in compliance with New York State regulations, okay? However, Parrington, I've been told, has been successfully doing this for years. So this might be something, clearly their lawyers are doing something that ours and Penfield ran afoul of the same things. So clearly their lawyers are doing something that ours and Penfield aren't. So it might be worth kind of revisiting that. All right, and the Monroe County, that's Webster Park, good old Webster Park, which weirdly, in every map of it that I see, it's got a different acreage. So I don't know. In the 74 one, it was referred to as being like a 567 acre park. I think 2008 it was 542 acres. Now it's 540. So clearly something's happening to Webster Park, little by little. Maybe look into that. I don't know. But so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And the purpose of today was just to get people interested and to get a discussion going about this issue, because I think at the moment it's something that everybody cares about, but it's not something that people are really expressing and getting involved in. So I guess, yes, questions and comments time.
Yeah, well, obviously the letter that we got concerning Webster Golf Course, since the two of us just bought a house on the third hole, loved the house, loved sitting on our deck looking at this gorgeous view we got.
Right.
And when we saw what happened to Webster East, or Webster West, that scared the living hell out of us. Now we get this letter about Webster East, and it's like, you've got to. Yeah, well, I know you. Please. And anyway, we hear about them taking it off the open space, I guess I can see it on Webster West because they obviously wanted to sell the land and have developers develop it, which they're in the process of doing. Webster East, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've gone over a couple times talking to Scott, and I just came there literally 5 minutes before I came to this meeting. And Scott wasn't there, he's out on the golf course, but I talked to another gentleman who seemed like he knew what he was doing. And he said, trust me, he says, it would make me sick too. I showed him the letter I got. He says, he says that his words were, it was sold and it was purchased within the family and it's going to remain a golf course, which made me, both of us tickled pink. But it still doesn't make any sense to me if it stayed in the family, which makes it even less sense. If it stayed in the family and was sold, then why in the hell did they take it out of the open space to get their tax benefits? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, did they voluntarily take it out of the open space, or are we just talking about the open space?
Well, according to that letter that was sent out.
Yeah, they petitioned to take it out, and they're paying all those back taxes. So if you're going to pay $500,000, $600,000, you must have something in mind to recoup that. Whether, like you said, it wouldn't make sense just to transfer it within the family.
Right.
So they're probably going to sell it to developers. That's probably in their mind. Is that what you're getting at?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly.
And that's, so it is just this, I think that's a perfect example of kind of what I'm talking about, is that ongoing, right, we've got this sort of pressure from developers, this motivated development force, if you will, of developers, constantly seeking to acquire more and more of Webster's open space, because that's what they do, that's what makes them money. In my mind, there needs to be a counterbalance to that, okay? And the last time there was a counterbalance was in the 2008 open space referendum, okay? So, but there hasn't been anything ongoing since then to be constantly sort of pushing back against that, either in a sense of an open space committee or in the sense of zoning, which is trying to limit the development. And I don't even know if you can even do that with zoning, but I guess what I'm proposing is that we need to think in those terms now, because it is becoming an unpleasant place to live, to be quite frank. So Yeah,
So in the case of Webster East, it's still a golf course,
right,
the town really doesn't have a, pardon my French, a damn thing to say about it.
right, exactly. And I know that the town supervisor didn't want it to be turned into apartments, but the problem we've got there is that he wasn't able to offer what developers were willing to pay. And so you've got this conundrum between how much do you rely upon, you know, the ethical sort of sensibility of a landowner willing to sell to the town for less than what a developer will pay, and how much do you have to say that's just too much to expect and it's the role of the town to kind of step in and, you know, offer them more by getting a referendum going. I think that gentleman, and then, yeah.
You said that about the amount of money developer would want, or the landowner would want to sell it to the town.
Right.
But the one, and the town doesn't feel. Well, part of the problem with the town doesn't feel is the town is 5 people sitting on a board headed by one person. There has been no referendums in years asking the town, or even questionnaires sent out,
Right.
asking town residents
Right.
what they truly do
Right.
feel.
Right.
The town board is currently going by 20-year-old
Yep.
information.
Absolutely, and that was the point that I made when I went and spoke at the town board meeting, that you can't, you know, rely on, you know, what happened in 2001, particularly, not just because, right, we're a totally different town than we were then, but because the 2008 referendum passed. So that's clear indication that, you know, that in that time, even between 2000 and 2008 development, like people kind of, you know, were more willing to consider like doing this,
But
okay?
the town is basing all its information on surveys and information from 20 years ago,
Right.
and nobody in the town has done it, even
What I'm doing,
comprehensive-
right, no, I know, right, yeah,
Even your
exactly.
comprehensive plan for the town
Or
is
that.
greatly outdated, and the town supervisor did state that as soon as he got his town hall remodeled, he was gonna have a committee to start a new comprehensive plan.
Right, right. And that hasn't been done, right?
So he
So-
spent his money on his nice new office and hasn't done what he said he's gonna do.
But I think the point to take from that is, you know, that clearly even that, you know, pledge at least is reflective of the fact that, you know, that he realizes that this is something which the town does want. You know, so, but I think there just does need to be, you know, a serious sort of awareness, I guess, on the part of what you're saying, the board members, that this is something that we do want.
So I understand that it's privately owned and you can't do a lot with that, but at the same time, if it was sold and developed, then I did hear that that would require us to put another school. So my girls go to Schlegel. So they're in 3rd and 5th grade at Schlegel. Also, full disclosure, I'm running for County Ledge in District 8. So that is something that we can look at to say, well, wait a second. If this gets developed and you're putting all these houses on and presume you have many families moving in and therefore many children coming in, that's gonna put a strain on, like you said, infrastructure, roads, schools, all these other things that we pay for, then we have to look at that.
And one thing to note is that the amount of money that you spend on your schools in your town budget does not count towards your tax cap. So you can have, you know, multiple multifamily residential things, and people have maybe, let's say, 3 kids, okay? And your taxes go way up because the schools, you know, are obviously, you know, you're having to pay for all those kids to go to school. The only way to offset that and stay within, you know, so I'm making 2 points here. So the only way to keep taxes low when you have to increase school taxes for so many people would be to keep building out, you know, commercial, industrial, okay, businesses that have to pay higher taxes. So one is kind of fueling the other. So you can look at it like that. One form of development is kind of almost necessitating the other.
But on that, you
Yeah.
know, just to keep taxes low kind of standpoint, there was that flyer that was sent out that said, oh, well, we've only raised taxes 83 cents.
Right,
But 83 cents on $4 and some odd cents is almost 20%.
Right.
So our taxes have been raised 20% in just a few years. So
Right.
I don't know how low they're really staying.
right.
Right.
Yeah, no. And I think there is going to be a revaluation of property value coming up soon too.
Right,
So
that's the
that's
other
gonna
thing.
affect things as well.
And the zoning should be redone
Right.
soon too. I think it's kind of best practice.
Right,
soon. Yeah.
Right. One of the interesting things, I don't know if I've got data, I think it looks, is it this one that I'm thinking of, or is it, this is, one of the things that kind of tickled me a little bit is a lot of the sort of medium-high residential areas, at least that one, and I think this one here, are over like undeveloped land as well, so it kind of, it reflects it in here, okay? It reflects an intention, I think, and you know, it's kind of we're going the wrong direction here. It's you know, we need to kind of be reining it back in. So I don't know. Yeah.
First,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think I-
Can you go and then, yeah, sorry.
One of my questions is that, yes, we stayed under the tax cap, and yeah, I would like to stay under the tax cap, but we were close, and we had some wiggle room.
Mhm.
And I don't know, in my family, if we have a big purchase, we save. So why wouldn't the board consider
Yeah.
earmarking monies that we are going to set aside? So that when the opportunity came to buy at the going rate, because I can understand a person who owns a piece of property not wanting to sell
Mhm.
to the town for less than what they can get from a
Yep.
developer.
Yep.
Well, then why wouldn't we have a pool of money? If we're still under the tax cap, why don't we
Yep.
use that little bit of wiggle room? Why not make that a priority and say, yes, we're giving you permission to set this aside in a special fund for this purpose? Not a rainy day fund that you could go and grab the money out anytime you want for anything.
Yep.
But the money would be there, and then maybe there would be a referendum to say, well, this parcel is available and coming up. Shall we use our, this fund, for that purchase? Instead of saying, no, we don't save money on the side for special projects.
Right. And in fact, that was, and I'm struggling here to find the exact wording, but that was absolutely one of the suggestions in the 2008 plan was to create a slush fund for the purchase and the preservation of open space, so that when properties like, let's say the golf course, right, arose, we don't have a supervisor who's on the phone but is unable to basically offer anything competitive.
Right. I mean, I've heard him say on
Right.
occasion that he doesn't believe that the
The town
town
should
should hold
offer-
people's money. That
Okay,
he
that's
doesn't
good.
believe the town should hold people's money, that the town should spend, that he should make sure it stays in individuals' pockets. Well, then we're going, if we would,
Like,
interested in
this is it.
purchasing,
Yep.
we would be paying later at a greater price.
Right.
with
So,
more
that kind of was when I first started putting this whole thing together. So when I first made the website, and I put up the survey, and I put up the petition, which, by the way, everybody should, if you could please go on to that website and do the survey and the petition. I was kind of thinking in that idealistic sense of, let's break the tax cap. What is it, a $400 check? It's the portion of the STAR rebate. I think half of that is staples and copying and flyers and signs, I mean, I'd be willing to do it, but I'm not gonna hold everybody to that, because that's a real check for some people. But yeah, I mean, if a lot of people were willing to do that, then that, hey, then we're not beholden to wait until the 2025 bond gets paid off. But at the very least, I think we need to consider, working towards that date of 2025, assuming that we have to do it by committee. Now, in 2001, they got a consultant in, but I think committee is probably the more likely and the most likely to be accepted option, at least with the board constituted as it stands right now prior to the election. just because that's, I think, the preferred option, do it by committee, so, yeah. You had a comment.
I did, two
Okay.
things though. First, I wanted to thank you for doing this.
It's my
we live in a-
pleasure.
Yeah, I'm sure it's
Sort of.
actually way more than that.
It's kind of a dubious definition of pleasure, but,
We live in that section between Hard and Holt, where
Yep.
they, yeah, ripped down that
Yep.
beautiful woods and
Yep.
put in that. And it broke my heart, and
Absolutely.
I wanted to do it, it is here too, but I didn't have the bandwidth, so
right,
I can stand behind you, and I'm so glad you did it.
yeah.
I have a confusion, and I've been reading, or I read in the newspaper a few times, where they're looking at this development, and there are these there are these zoning issues, and they're waiving stuff.
You can go to the zoning board of appeals and just apply for an ordinance, basically, and as, you know, so,
But if they waive it, I mean, can't we convince them to stop waiving these so that they can't just?
this is an area that I'm not as informed on as perhaps others here, or perhaps that I, you know, could be. I know that there are, sort of, ways of fighting things. If, you know, if there is, you know, an appeal, I think if there is an appeal registered, you know, the people have, I think it does kind of get a hearing, maybe, I don't know. I think there is some, that would be something to ask,
Yeah.
I suppose, the planning board, or, right, you know, call the town supervisor and ask him. Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree, it is frustrating. It does feel like a lot of this is done behind closed doors, between people that are just essentially financially benefiting. And that's, you know, I think that's another point to make, is that, you know, the town supervisor and the board talk a lot about fiscal responsibility. It's fiscally responsible. He said it would be fiscally responsible to purchase, you know, land above assessed value. That's not fiscally responsible. It's not responsible to do that with the taxpayers' money. Well, there's another kind of responsibility, and how about responsible to preserve the quality of life in this town, because that's just getting sold down the river at the moment. You know, and so I think that really, I would argue, in allowing so much development, then, you know, you could say, well, what is there to allow? It's within the zoning laws, so it has to be, you know, we can't say no. Well, then change the zoning laws, you know, because that, I think, it's getting to the point where further development and allowing further development is bordering now on irresponsible. You know, yeah.
Page 37. And the, what do they call it, the comprehensive plan?
This guy,
Yeah.
yeah.
Establish a dedicated fund for
You
open
found
space
it, thank you.
acquisition and acquire properties identified as
Yeah.
priorities.
Yep. Has that happened? No.
They haven't identified the properties, so.
Since the previous referendum, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Page 37.
Page 37, thank you, Gail. But, you know, and there's a lot of really great stuff in here. You know, we've got, you know, an important activity that could be overseen by the reconstituted conservation board is to ensure that new developments will not result in the unnecessary removal of topsoil or trees. That, you know, clear cut, didn't really, you know, clearly hasn't been adhered to. Currently, the town has a law against removal of topsoil, which may need to be reviewed and modified. However, there is no official tree preservation ordinance in the town code that requires developers to submit a tree preservation plan to the town prior to receiving a building permit. So, as much as they say we should prohibit clear cutting, there's no ordinance against that. And what's the simplest way of getting the land, you know?
Brittany Woods.
Absolutely. And where, you know, where the country max is supposed to be. You know, those woods weren't old growth, but they were 40 years
Those
old.
woods were originally an orchard.
Yep, yep,
I
Yeah.
picked apples there,
yep. In Brittany Woods or the ones on Ridge?
on the ridge.
And that was a cherry orchard too,
Yeah.
according to
I
John
picked-
from Creek Edge, yeah.
Yeah. And,
And, you know, it's, as much as you can't say, you know, a town can be, you know, you can't preserve something in time. It's you know, it's a town, it's a living, breathing organism. It's not, you know, a museum exhibit. But there's a certain character of Webster, a certain je ne sais quoi that, you know, I think growing up I always appreciated. It wasn't like, you know, all of the other suburbs. Greece, exactly, or Henrietta now, you know, which is what I compared it to in the meeting that I spoke at. And, you know, we're losing that character. We're losing that character. And I, you know, that's kind of what I think, you know, this is all about, is trying to preserve, you know, a place that we all care about, really. So, yeah.
It's not really a comment per se, but just the way these, like if you go to like Henrietta or those areas where they went through this process probably 25 years ago, and the stuff got sold and was out, and now like, if there's empty
Yeah.
stuff there.
Because nobody wants to live there.
Forever, this is like, what are they gonna do with a
Exactly.
huge building that's,
Yep.
that's concrete, it's
Yep.
30 feet high? Country Max in the middle of Webster?
Right.
Like
I
right
know.
now, like, who's gonna go there? I mean, that's what Route 104 is in a sense for, as much as it offers you that ability to get that country feel of stuff to, you can go to Tractor Supply, and, like now you can have that like, essentially like right in the heart of the town.
And
And
you know,
what's
and
gonna
this
do
is,
to the traffic that's
Oh,
already.
God, you
totally-
can't drive down Ridge. You can't drive down Ridge. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I don't, on a weekend, I don't
Who
even
go-
bother.
There's like no option.
Yeah.
Or lunchtime, forget it.
Right.
Lunchtime.
How long before they want to widen it,
Oh, it had already got widened, at the intersection there, so, I think it is something that, this is, if we're taking today's, obviously the whole town didn't turn out or anything like that, but I think that this is a representative sample, it's something that people are interested in and care about, and, I think the town, needs to listen, and it needs to listen now, because you can see that every moment, every for sale sign, every available with, acreage underneath it, in front of a wooded lot, it's just, yeah.
It's scary.
It's scary, exactly. We're losing, what makes Webster, Webster, so yeah. Yeah.
I had another thought as far as the way zoning and the request for the waivers to the zoning go. And I think about the plot at 104 in Jackson and how the developer came in and presented that and then said, well, you would much prefer my small little strip mall to be here because the only other thing that could be built in this area for zoning would be like a gas station. Or I forget what, he gave one other example, I think it was a fast food restaurant. That's all that would fit in that plot. And we would much rather have my strip mall that would have hours of, 8 to 5 or 8 to 7 or something like that than you would want a 24-hour gas station or another fast food restaurant here. So during that whole public hearing, it was kind of a scare tactic from the
Right.
developer who said, well, if it's not us.
Because
then
there
you
was no conservation option on the table. Because there's no pushback right now from the town to say, hold the phone, we're doing another referendum, these are properties under consideration, and we're gonna kibosh any development on them for now, because we're looking to acquire them. And I think, they can be more ambitious than they were, perhaps,
And the
in
other issue would be
2008.
that you always hear, yes, we're going to approve, you can go ahead with your plans, but have all appropriate building permit, all appropriate permits must be submitted. Well, maybe there should be a little bit more looking at what those permits are, because there's not only, there's different kinds of permits, and there would be permits from New York State DEC with regards to our wetlands around here. That, well, who's making sure that they really have the DEC permit for changing how the water flows back at, what was it, on Schlegel Road, the property on Schlegel Road, where they got an easement and built a culvert and changed somebody's pond, and now their pond is dry. Well, did they really have, the wetlands permit from DEC? The stuff that's getting built over behind on Maple Drive, the retention pond or whatever. That involves, certain wetlands kinds of easements and things like that. Did they get the right permits? So all you see in the zoning board is pending you receiving all appropriate permits. Well, who's making sure that you have every permit, not just, shoreline ones? There's all those shoreline ones, the development down there on the bay.
Yeah.
One point on comprehensive plans, they don't necessarily mean anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's all good intentions, isn't it?
It's all good intentions. If
Right.
any of you are familiar with Brittany Woods, which is going in the village on Phillips Road, just south of Ridge Road, that was in the village comprehensive plan to approach, it was owned by Wegman, because there was, at one point, 50 years ago, supposed to be a store there. It was in the village comprehensive plan to be developed as a park because of the high population over in that end of the village.
Well, it would have been nice for the residents of Phillips Village at least.
Yeah,
probably.
well, the high population there.
Absolutely.
And, well, Phillips Village was originally pushed on the village by Wegman.
Well, you know, and I think that it's, we're getting into some kind of murky waters here, but it's how do you then how do you hold
Yeah.
accountable? You know, as it's easy for a developer to walk in and say, here are my plans, it's in line with zoning, yep, sure, rubber stamp, here you go. But how do we as a public say, no, we don't want this to keep happening? There needs to be some, you know,
I would go back to
restriction.
zoning. I would go
Yeah.
back to zoning. In my opinion,
Yep,
we should zone every piece of land in the town as restrictive as we can, and then the developer has to show just cause to change that zoning to suit his plan, not we have a plan that will let anybody come in and develop most anything they
Right.
want.
because we're at a point really where we've got enough. We've got enough amenities, we've got enough housing for those of us that live here. At the moment, it's not benefiting anybody that actually already lives here to build more. It's just benefiting developers and, yeah, basically. Yeah.
The town did not stick with the zoning they had when that Webster Golf Course, that Webster West Golf Course was sold. They changed the zoning completely. Everybody else around has to have a half-acre lot or more.
Right.
But no, they can have little lots. Now, why? The pressure from big money
Yep.
does what they want to do, and the town doesn't have the guts to stand up to them.
Well, I think what it is that there, and I think we're going back to that misperception. I think there are certain people, obviously developers and their families in town, that do want it to be like that. But I think the majority of people don't, but we haven't up to this point been vocal and expressive about it. So that was the other kind of thing that I was trying to do with the website and the sort of survey and the petition on the website, and something like this, where I can go to the supervisor and be like, look, people that showed up feel like this, you know. It's about sort of presenting, hey, you know, this is what we want as a town. You are obligated, it would be irresponsible to ignore our wishes. And I think if you know, the wishes of the people are made clear, you know, the optimist in me would like to believe that they would be adhered to. But obviously, that doesn't always end up being the case. So, you know, with the election coming up, I think it is something that's worth considering. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm with the Webster Citizen Action League. We're on the board, all of us here. We're filming it. It'll be on our website or on the YouTube channel. I just want to say that these fellows have been taping the village board and the Webster board and the zoning boards, the planning boards, the workshops. No one shows up. We have a very complacent community.
I would disagree. I don't think that we're complacent. I
Even
think that it's
when
difficult.
we've had a major thing, because the whole reason why Webster Citizen Action League was formed, and it's all volunteer, is to bring information to the community, to have transparent government. And we do that, and we, you know, tell about a meeting that's going to be up, and you'd be very surprised how many people show up, unless it's really, really, really important to them, and they have a group. At the town board meetings, if a group does show up, and there is quite a few people in the town board, the supervisor waits for them to leave when it's done, and is pretty much saying, you can leave now, instead of staying there and hearing what else is going to be heard that meeting. those meetings in the town board, if you're lucky, they go for about a half an hour. That's if you're lucky. The village board, they go for an hour and a half or so. Isn't Webster town a little bit bigger than the village?
Well, nothing gets discussed. I mean, if you
No,
go,
it's all,
I mean, if you go and watch, there's
Pre-planned.
no opinions or discussion that's occurring at that board meeting. So
Yeah.
to go and to sit there, I watch on YouTube or whatever, what you film. But to go there and sit there, there is no discussion.
And could the very experience that you were complaining about be part of the reason why people don't go to the board meetings? If they feel like there is no point, that might be, and also I would say that, I'm a pretty gutsy person. I was a teacher for 10 years in another country, and obviously I'm pretty comfortable speaking in front of people, but I was nervous as heck when I went to that board meeting, and it's hard to go and stand up in front of a potentially hostile audience and speak your piece. And not a lot of people really shy away. Some people I was talking to about this, they are into this cause, they care about it, but political involvement, I don't know, there's something with people sometimes that they're just really reluctant to kind of organize. I don't know either, but I think it's shaming them and saying, oh, we're not good enough. I mean, that's not going to achieve, what I'm trying to achieve is make it easier for people to speak their piece and get involved. So wouldn't it be easier, let's say, if not you as, Mr. or Mrs. Smith feel this way and want to go to a town board meeting and speak your mind, but let's say Keep Webster Green feels like this, okay? Which we can all maybe say we're members of, I don't know. Something like that. But, that was kind of my thing, is like, let's make it easier for people to express themselves. And just, act on behalf of the town who aren't, doing something like this, providing, giving, saying like, let's have a special meeting dedicated to, and this, may come out of this, let's have a special town meeting dedicated to having another referendum, having another open space committee, people that are interested, come along, like what you're saying, he had committed to, okay? So this is kind of like what I'm doing in that stead, I guess. I'm trying to kind of
And we,
raise it.
as Webster Citizens Action, we greatly appreciate interest. I mean, I am a member also of another green space organization. We're trying to preserve the old Webster well field
Yep.
off of DeWitt Road.
Yep. I've been aware of that as an issue, so yeah, that does obviously need
This is
consideration as well.
semi-protected by an overlay zoning on top of the zoning. It is zoned residential. There is an overlay,
Right.
which
So that would be
the
something.
town claims it protects it 100%. It doesn't. There are some types of development that, other than housing, that can go in there.
Mhm.
We could bulldoze the whole thing tomorrow and put a ball field in.
Right.
And it is the only natural green space left on the Rundequoit Bay in Webster.
Mhm.
And so, as another group, we are looking at trying to preserve that well field from the developers. And the town says it's protected with their overlay, but as we all know, all it takes to change zoning is 3
Just a
town board
petition.
members.
Yep, absolutely.
And so it could be a development tomorrow.
So, I think in addition to, possibly what we've mentioned before in terms of, okay, you can change the zoning to be more restrictive, that would be obviously really nice. You can, pursue another referendum. There does need to be a very real and sincere, I think, commitment on the part of the town board, whoever they may be after this upcoming election, if they are the same, if they are different, whatever. It needs to be something which is adhered to, really, in a genuine way, the spirit of it. Because right now, the zoning does not adhere at all, in my opinion, to the spirit of even the park districts and the park lands that have been set aside. Why? Why is this large lot residential? That needs to be changed. If we really are saying we're committed to preserving Webster Park and, Whiting Road and Gosnell Big Woods, then conservation area, and have that designation then be available for any new acquisition that the town invests in. They've invested money in this. They should, obviously, it's in their interest to protect it.
If we're truly committed to that land if we're truly committed, as the town board says they are, to the well field and other lands, why is it still zoned there? Why don't we have a restrictive zoning? One more obstacle in the way of a developer.
Right.
I mean, the county park, if it's zoned residential, the county decides, we can't afford this corner of the park anymore. And there is land down there that was part of the park that I know of that has a house on it that was sold off. Park commissioner used to live in. In later years, they sold it off to residential. I mean, if the town's committed to keeping the county park a park, why is it zoned anything other than non-developable parkland?
Yeah.
I mean-
So, yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of covered it. I will be pursuing, trying to get another referendum going. I think I can safely say that everybody here today would be up for that, pursuant, to acquire more open space. I'm sure some of us would even be willing to break the tax cap for it, but I don't think I can commit that on behalf of everybody or even on behalf of the whole town. But, I think that it's important really to have something like this where people can meet and gather. And obviously, we've sort of talked about the way the town board meeting is set up. It doesn't really feel like that at the town board meeting, that they're there to sort of, hey, guys, open ears. Maybe that is because a lot of times the people who do show up, it's a hostile sort of situation.
How often are they held?
2 times a month. I think it's like the second and the last Thursday of every month on the town board
So will
side.
there be one before this election?
I would assume so. I'm not sure if that maybe is, I would assume that there is, yeah, definitely. I mean, that would be an idea for if we wanted to, for
Everybody
people
in this
to.
room go.
Absolutely, yeah,
That should be the next
second and fourth, yeah. Am I correct on that? It's the second and fourth Thursday town board meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that, again, if that's kind of what the website's for as well, is, if I, for instance, say post, going to the town board meeting, everybody join me type thing. But, you get into a situation where, again, you are relying upon compliance and people's schedules and everything else, whereas I'm almost thinking it's like, if we're meeting like this, by the way, I do have this library space, because I didn't know how many people were gonna turn up, booked for Friday, November 2nd, from, I think, like 3 to 5. So if we all wanted to meet here again, if you wanted to tell people about it, I might have some, absolutely, and I might have some updates, on any progress made to pursue a new town open space plan and referendum. Okay, so, yeah. Would people be interested in meeting again? Is that something that people would be interested in doing? It wouldn't have to be like another 2-hour session, because I think we've covered most of the facts. But if people would be interested, then we'll be here on that Friday.
Can I pass around a sheet?
Yeah,
For people
why
to
don't we do
put their,
that? If we pass around a sheet, and if you're, sort of interested in being involved in this as a group, you can, sort of put your name and a contact, just, email or phone number or something like that. I wouldn't be using it per se, but if you give me an email, what I can do is, I think, set up a kind of link or something, or
We can set up a subscription.
there you go, that's it, that's what I was talking about, okay. Just to the website, so if I post anything new, you would get that updated in your email, basically, okay? You could alternatively just go on the website and sign up for that. But that could be, something that you
What
could
is the
do.
website?
KeepWebsterGrave.com, pretty easy, yeah.
So I haven't been to the website, but you mentioned there's a petition.
I didn't see it on there.
What is,
I'll post a more updated link. There was a link to the petition on the website when I first created the website. But the petition is essentially asking the town to do another referendum, or pursue another open space acquisition, which I think more people than not in Webster would be interested in at this point. Yeah.
On that petition, I skimmed it, I didn't read it, word for word, but it looked like it was also saying that I approved removing the tax.
That's what I need to alter, because that, I need to alter that, because I put that up in the very beginning of things, when I thought that was kind of what needed to happen now. And now I've kind of revised my position somewhat, become a little less idealistic. So, yeah, if I remove that,
And I could sign it.
okay, yeah, that makes sense, that's no problem. Yeah, so I'll do that today then, okay.
I think it would be nice if they had a moratorium on building until things are settled of where we're going with this.
It would be nice, I don't know if that's, I'm
know.
assuming there's a lot of interests that would be against that and that have a stronger influence on members of the town board than we do. And that's kind of a sad way to feel about your local government, but there you go. Yeah.
Just one point, we're talking about the open space, that I don't know if anybody's aware, the town did recently get some new open space on State Road, near Salt.
Okay, yep,
But it's not land that the town sought. The developer went in, bought a piece of land, developed what he thought he could easily develop. The stuff that was too hilly, too swampy, too undevelopable, too costly to develop, he donated to the town basically to get it off his tax rolls.
right,
So
right,
when the town tells you they acquired some new land, yes, they did, but
right.
the town
They-
didn't
it's-
go out
it's-
seeking or trying to do anything, and
Right.
it's land that is not
Right.
really
It's
suitable for
acquired
development.
implies an agency that didn't exist in this situation, yeah. And that, you know, and in a lot of cases, that is what happens, is it's through donation, really. So, you know, you're almost reliant upon the goodwill of the landowner. And we're not all
That's how it
landowners,
works.
and what can the rest of us do except for insist upon, you know, more active resistance from the town to development?
Yeah. Basically how we acquired Gosnell Woods.
Right, exactly.
But not many people are as rich as the Gosnell family.
But, you know, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to cover. I did have, I don't suppose you brought the 74 with you, did you? Yeah. I wanted to read you guys a paragraph before we close, from the end of, not the map, but the actual text. I think that's the more current one. It's just the text of the 74. You know what I'm saying? That has the reference to, I might have that here anyway, but I'm just trying to see. The text that accompanied 74 beyond. I don't think so. It's, it looks kind of like this.
Only if I gave it to someone and then so it doesn't look
That's
like
all
what
right.
it used to look like.
Okay, that's all right. It was just a kind of motivational paragraph, but, you know, in general, I think just to sum up, it's something that, you know, needs to be addressed now because it's now is the time. So, and it's important. It's important to preserve
This is the one you need.
what space we have left. No, I think that was 2008. That's okay though, thank you. That's all right. All right, so thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. It's, you know,
So you have this booked again.
I have this booked again for November 2nd. Okay, so November 2nd, and I will be posting that on the website. So if more people would like to come then, I should have an update on where the town stands on pursuing a referendum, okay, to acquire more open space. Again, the reason I did it for November 2nd is because that's in advance of the election, and if this is something that people are very interested in, you know, if more of us show up on November 2nd, if you know people that are interested, please let them know. And this is something that I think that, you know, that we can easily get the ball rolling on.
Actually,
Yes.
I just want to point out, there is early voting, so actually the election starts next Saturday,
Okay, fair enough.
October 26th.
All right.
So you could technically vote before then,
Okay,
and then regular polling places on November 5th.
yep.
So,
Where would you vote early?
there are 7 different places around Monroe County. I have some information here if you're interested, but and I have the information on my website as well. But the ones closest to Webster are gonna be Culver Ridge Plaza in Arundecoit and the Penfield Town Hall. And they just, you give them your name and address, and they print out your ballot. So that's new to New York State this year. So
Interesting.
I was just, actually, before I came here, I was out canvassing to let people know that.
Oh, yeah. So if you, there are actually a couple extra copies of some of the material, all right? So we've got the green print from 2001, which, you know, some of these lands may or may not be available still. And we've got this, which I really like, which is the one from 74 overlay, so you can see the woods.
Excuse me, why
Yeah.
was the comprehensive plan not been updated since 2008? That's 11 years.
Yeah, I know. That's a good
Why is
question.
why is nobody holding anybody accountable here?
Yeah,
Isn't that their job?
yeah,
Is to have a comprehensive plan?
yeah. Oh, very good question. Yeah, so,
I wanna go, so you don't, but you don't know when the next one is?
well, what's today?
You know when it's gonna be, it's gonna be Halloween.
Is Halloween on a Thursday?
Yeah.
The 31st.
So I should go dressed as a witch, and then really give it to them.
All right, well, then they might see us at the town board meeting. All right, so yes, thank you.